Growing up, I spent a few years outside Charleston, South Carolina. And there, if you have a carbonated brown beverage, they're likely to call it a Coke. Pepsi is a Coke, Dr. Pepper is a Coke. You've got a root beer, they'll probably call it a Coke. The brand of Coca-Cola has become so ubiquitous that the brand has become the thing itself. The same thing is true of like aspirin. Aspirin was a brand name and people got so used to using aspirin as a stand-in for painkiller that I have a headache, do you have an aspirin? I have Bayer, I have ibuprofen, I have Excedrin, pain, head, aspirin, please. Anything that makes this go away is an aspirin. To me, Dungeons and Dragons is the same thing for fantasy RPGs. If we're playing a game where I'm playing a dwarf, an elf, a halfling, a human, we're forming a party and we're going to go into dungeons and fight dragons. We're going to fight bigger, better monsters to become bigger, better heroes. We're going to saving tiny villages to saving entire worlds. Then you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. The beauty of the D20 system that Dungeons and Dragons runs on for a lot of designy dungeon masters is that it is so easy to pull it apart and add different things into it, and it still maintain its Dungeons and Dragons-ness. I can pull from Pathfinder RPG and add it in. I can pull from The Witcher RPG and add it in. I can pull from other editions and add it in. I can make it exactly what I want by modding it. It's like Minecraft or Skyrim. I can go into Skyrim, and if I want to put rad scorpions and laser rifles and power armor from Fallout into Skyrim, I could do that. It would be weird, but I could do it if I wanted to. And that math still stays the same and it still seems flexible, that the game would hold up from a gameplay perspective. If the fantasy would be a little weird. Okay, I'll prove this is easy to do without changing the fundamental math of how the game works, but it's going to change how it feels to play at the game. Say if you have casters at the table and you have a melee player, a fighter. Fighter is constantly attacking. They have 2 attacks and they're hasted and they've got an action surge. So they're constantly rolling dice and they're rolling damage and it feels awesome. And over there you have a caster that feels like they constantly get to turns where they roll maybe no dice and they just get told that that failed and then they go on with their turn. There are 2 types of spell casting. There's spell attacks and spell save, no matter what caster you are, but we'll use a wizard in our example with an 18 intelligence and a +2 modifier. So 18 gives them +4 to the intelligence modifier and +2 proficiency bonus. So they have a +6 to any spell casting they do. You want to cast Firebolt, it's going to challenge the armor class of that monster over there. +6, and then I roll a dice, add the dice result, attack the armor class. The armor class over there, say the monster has +2 armor and +4 dex, +6 bonus, and they have a +10 to their armor class for a 16. Okay, I rolled a 16, I successfully hit. Great. What if I want to cast something like Charm instead, and I cast it on that monster? What do? I add my bonus here, my 6 to an 8. Where'd the 8 come from? And I challenge the spell save of that monster. And that monster is going to get +4 bonus to their wisdom, just to make the math easy and comparable. And they are proficient in their wisdom save, so they now have a +6 to their bonus to succeed at the save. And they roll to see whether they succeed at overcoming my charm. But again, where'd that 8 come from when you were deciding whether the charm's difficulty was? And where'd the 10 come from for the armor class? The designers are assuming a roll for a defense and just giving you an average result. And because we want spells to hit a little less often, say 10% less often, I can just assume an 8. You can change that and say all spell saves are assumed to be the roll of a 10, and that way that monster now has a wisdom save of 16 all the time. That's what their wisdom save is. And whenever the caster wants to cast Charm, they roll a d20 and they get to roll the dice more often and say, I get to try to charm. And that can add to the feel of, what if I'm really good at charming things? What if I want to take feats or magic items that say, if you're casting an enchantment spell, you get a +2 to that casting. Now you get to roll the dice, and if I hit that magical natural 20, I can charm the Lich or the Dragon. And if I roll a 1, it's not the Dungeon Master's fault that they rolled really well on the save. It's back on the player that my dice just are not cooperating with me. We're just changing where the saves and the attacks go. If I want to make saves less successful, I don't have to make it a 10 over there. I could make it an 8. The same 8 that you got when you were figuring out how hard it is for your monster to resist this charm spell. I could just make all saves 8 plus modifier and plus proficiency if appropriate. And I have a base number for all spell saves and just shifting who gets to roll for which attack. You could do the same thing with attack rolls and say, I want a lot more rolls at my table. Let me remove that default result of a 10 from the armor class, and we are rolling every time it attacks, and ties always go to attacker, or ties create some weird system where if it happens, the monster gets to attack back because somehow they managed to slip through an attack while they were blocking a sword, or their spell went off, or you both critical, whatever it is that you want to do to create this edge system, to create a particular kind of effect, because you want that very action movie, physical combat kind of style of game. If you wanted to do that and you still have not fundamentally changed the math of the game, you've just altered the weights you put on it and how much you're rolling or not rolling. Maybe that's scaring you because you're going, yeah, that math technically works, but that's a lot of extra rolling in combat. And isn't combat slow enough, James? You really want to slow that down? Agreed. I would do that with like 2 players and me as the dungeon master to really get that kind of dynamic duo, wild, swingy combat in there where great stunts, humongous saves. Let's look at something a little bit more simple and something that I would add to like my Viking campaign. In Viking fantasy, shield wall, axe, they're famous for their shields, so I want the shield to matter a lot more. I love the shield spell for wizards, that there's a reaction that they can use to pop that up, burn a spell, and get more AC in an emergency. And maybe I want to add that to my fighters, my melee characters, so that they have it. Because again, Vikings, shield, it should matter. In Pathfinder, if you want, you can use an action to raise your shield, and then you get the armor bonus of the shield. And then the shield is hit points. If your dragon is swiping you, those damage must go through the shield first before it hits the character. If it bypasses the shield's shattered. I could add that to my D&D game. I can say, okay, I do want to honor that your melee character has more armor, and some of that armor comes from the shield, so okay, you always get that. But as a reaction, you can raise that shield and say all the damage is going to hit the shield first. So when the dragon rolls 60 damage with its claws, they're going to hit the shield first. I'm going to track the hit points of that because they're stats for shield hit points. And that goes to the shield first and then to me. And now I have a reaction to choose whether I take that damage to me or that damage to the shield. And if I wanted, I could convert that to shield damage for the caster as well and say at certain breakpoints, you have certain types of magical shields that you're replicating. And it starts out as just, basic small wooden shield, all the way up to steel shield when you're the maximum level caster. And that way, yeah, you can raise the shield, but it has hit points to it. And if you try to raise it and you block the dragon's attack, you're going to do that. And then it's going to go rip apart your force shield, but you did take a lot of the damage away so that it is still getting some more swingy, visceral, meaty combat in there. Beyond base mechanics and new house rules to slightly adjust how systems work, you can make whole new systems. This is especially effective for downtime because it can customize the game to exactly what the players want to do. Maybe you have characters that want to make magic items. That's what they like. How would I go about carving up these dragons so that I can make a sword of dragon slaying? Or I, the necromancer, want to grab the teeth from all the dead ghouls that I'm killing so that I can toss them back onto the ground and summon that exact ghoul with those exact things. I want to play a summoner that is a relationship with all the individual things, like a Pokemon Ash Ketchum kind of character, and I know each one of my summoned monsters, so I equip them and they become better in their individuals to themselves. You can make those kind of systems. In my own game, I've been playing since the 3.5 era in my home world, and there was a leadership feat there. And I have lots of players that take it and create their own organizations. 3 come to mind. There's the Eclipse Council, the Order of the Shattered Gate, and the High Cathedral of Kataris that players have made. Current player, new system, found out about those and went, how'd they do that? told them leadership feat. They said, can I take the leadership feat? Sure, absolutely. Go back to old systems, old D&D, lifted the feat and gave it to them, and they now have a bunch of followers. They asked, well, what do I do with these followers? Traditionally, they just sat in a keep and they guarded it in case, I guess, a dragon came along, and then your followers would all defend your keep from the dragon or invading armies or whatever it is. Player wasn't really into that. They're like, well, I kind of want to, like, I'm a bard and I have a bardic college. Shouldn't they be like going out and gathering new knowledge, new spells, new attendees, new students, and bring them back and spreading the glory of this college? Not unlike in The Name of the Wind, when he goes to college and goes to the library, he finds out that the library sends out adventurers to go gather knowledge and bring them back to the library. She wants to do that. Okay, cool. We can do that. So I do a little bit of work and go, okay, what could I do? I do have books that have like kind of army systems. That's not what this player wants. I remember that MCDM released their Strongholds and Followers rules. I don't have that book, but I was able to go, hey, what do those cards look like? I remember Matt showing one of those cards in his video, and I went, oh, that's cool. I found some online that somebody had made, and I was able to look at it and go, okay, I can see how I would create a very streamed down character card. Here are things that they're good at, things that they're bad at, special abilities that you can use, and make them more like Pokemon that they can have in their hand and go, I want to send this follower after that, and this follower after that, and this follower after that. I understand what hit dice and hit points are kind of representing. The average damage of a weapon is 1d8. Some monsters do 2d8, and the average hit dice for a character is a d8. Characters don't get d20s, they get d6s, d8s, d10s, and d12s. It's around a d8. So then, if I was taking average damage and average hit points, then the average damage from one monster equals one hit dice. So I don't need hit points for these characters. I just need to know what level they are, and their level is essentially a hit dice. And if they go up against a dragon does 2 hit dice worth of damage when they hit. Therefore, it just marks off the hit points on the character that I'm using as hit dice. I can adjust all that knowing how the math works, and it functionally is the same as if I had just given them average hit points and did average damage from the monster. Then I have to have a system where I can make adventures and go, adventures are really just a bunch of rolls. Checks for different things. Attacking a monster, convincing somebody to do something, using different skills to accomplish different types of things. And since these are small adventures for downtime for characters while the other players are doing whatever they want to do, making magic items, or they are running their own kingdom, or they're sending out their bardic followers, I need something I can do really quickly at the table and go, here are the list of possible adventures from them. I thought back to things like the mission table at World of Warcraft and went, that was kind of boring. And then I remembered Final Fantasy Tactics had, when you took your main adventures into an inn, and you talked to the innkeeper, there were dispatch missions that you could send all your unnamed characters off on, and it would ask things about who you wanted to send. There were some characters that were good at certain things and certain requirements for the adventures. So I put those together, and they're all down the doobly-doo, and you can use them, grab them, look at them. They're what's going to work at my table, because this doesn't need to be something that is going to work for every table out there. It needs to feel fair to this group, not that other group over there that is interested in a totally different style of gameplay. I don't want to sugarcoat this because it's possible to go too far with this. You can make so many house rules, so many custom systems, so many different things that layering one on top of another, it's just an unwieldy mess.
How shall one say, Director?
Too many notes, Your Majesty.
Exactly. Very well put. Too many notes.
No one can keep track of all the different changes that you've made, and you might as well scrap it all and start over. It is also possible that you just don't have the time. You've got kids, you've got a life outside of this, you've got work, you've got a lot of stuff to do, and it's hard enough to find a couple hours to sit down with a published adventure and work through how you're going to run it for that weekend. Yeah, I get that. It would be nice to have a game that was tailor-made to the kind of experience that you want, rather than having to muscle this game into what it is that we want it to be. We want to run Curse of Strahd, and we want gothic horror, and we want that primal fear of the dark, and characters that have dark vision are kind of going to ruin it. A character with flight that's able to fly to the top of Strahd's tower and just poke the crystal heart from outside the window kind of ruins the suspense for that. So you tell players no characters with flight, no characters with dark vision. Start of the game, 3 characters are going to show up, each with dark vision, because they were all hoping that they were going to be the character that got to make it through. And now you have to break their hearts. Wouldn't it be so much easier if we just used a system that was tailor-made to that kind of experience and ran Curse of Strahd and Shadow Dark instead? But maybe they don't have those rules and you really want to do that. It can be a lot of fun to do this kind of thing. And the D20 systems are flexible enough to allow something. You can just say, everybody that has dark vision, you get advantage on perception if you're in low light instead, and give them that. Dungeons and Dragons is like cookie batter. It is sugar, butter, flour, and you can put whatever you want into it, whether it's sprinkles or chocolate chips or walnuts or M&Ms or caramel things or macadamia nuts, and it's going to come out a cookie that's flavored specifically for your group. Whatever is going to be fun for them. Remember, Dungeon Masters, you're a player too. Try to have some fun.